The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is your embassy in the heart of Israel, founded in 1980. From our headquarters in Jerusalem through our branches in over 80 nations and yours in Canada, we seek to challenge the Church to take up its scriptural responsibility to remind Israel of the promises made to her in the Bible and to be a source of practical assistance to all the people in the land of Israel. On today's program, we visit the Galilee at the Mount of Beatitudes. Pastor Adam Gabeli chats with Reverend Malcom Hedding about the EU and the New World Order. And we learn how the Hebrews of the Old Testament saved water at Neot Kedumim, the biblical land reserve in Israel.
Seeing the multitudes, welcome. He went up to the mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him. He opened his mouth and started teaching them, saying, "Blessed so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Praise you, Lord. Thank you for the life we have."
Sermon on the Mount is not just a site. It's really the basic philosophy, foundation of Christianity. Who's going to inherit the kingdom of heaven?
Yeah.
So, this was always a Christian site, and I don't have to repeat myself, telling you there was a church here that was destroyed by the Muslims, but the church wasn't here. It was steps on the mountain, It was destroyed, and this is a modern one for the 1930s. By the way, by the year 2000, John Paul II, the Pope, he was here. He was preaching for over 200,000 Christians gathering here and talking about the Sermon on the Mount. We're not, the nuns here always tell us to be quiet, and we're not allowed to guide inside the church, so I'll just tell you in general what we're going to see. The guy that designed the church is somebody we're going to see a lot of his works. His name was Antonio Berluzzi. He was an Italian who was active here from the 1920s to the 1950s. And he built a lot of the most important churches in the Holy Land. So when he came to design the church over here, of course he knew very well the Sermon on the Mount, saying that the poor will inherit the kingdom of heaven. So he couldn't build here a big, impressive cathedral. He had to build something that will reflect the idea of the sermon. So look at the church over here. First of all, it's not big, and it's made from the local stone, okay, the black stone. The dome is greenish, bluish, like the sky in the Sea of Galilee. And when you will come inside, you will see the church is more this wall inside. From both sides of the door, you will see the gowns of the popes who visited here. One from 1964 and one from the year 2000. Inside, the sermon will be on the walls around you. The dome from inside is golden, like the moon and the sky. And beside that, like all Catholic churches, 14 stations of the cross, like a small and beautiful, but not going to impress you. The place here is really calm and very spiritual, with a beautiful garden. This is, by the way, dormitories for Catholics who are coming over here. Because I told you about Franciscan and the way they address you, you can see the sister here is a Franciscan. And almost every Catholic group will come here, and almost every pope that comes to Israel will come to this place.
Up next, Pastor Adam Gabeli discusses the New World Order with Reverend Malcom Hedding.
It's a joy that you're with us, Reverend Malcom. Reverend Malcom is the international spokesperson for the ICEJ, and he served 11 years as the international executive director. So it's an honor for us to have you here today, Reverend Malcom. And we're in a very, very particular and remarkable time. The state of Israel reformed in 1948 after a 2,000-year diaspora, miraculously becoming a nation again. 70 years from that, and many Christians, and including yourself, declare that we are rapidly approaching the return of Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus the Messiah, to this earth. And there are a few things that need to take place before that, even according to the scriptures, and we know you've blogged about certain things. Would you like to maybe touch on what some would like to call a new world order that is coming forth, or a Babylonian system per se that is referenced in the book of Revelation? But let's comment about Israel's role in the end time, in particular to this new world order.
Well, thank you, Adam. That's a very interesting question.
Loaded one.
It's a loaded one, and I'm surprised you found your tongue around it. Thank you very much. Yes, I think the New World Order, as people call it, well, the person who coined the term New World Order, first of all, in the Common Era, was actually George Bush Sr.,
Wow.
who used it many, many years ago as a New World Order. And of course, you find it on the $1 note, New World Order. And the New World Order is a sort of a dream that the world will find some type of utopia by itself and without the intervention of God, and that we are wise enough and smart enough to overcome our problems and to bring about a global system that will bring peace and prosperity to the world. That's essentially the dream. The New World Order ignores the fact that there's something terribly wrong with humanity, and that if you look across the world, there are conflicts and killing and wars and threats of war. There's no possibility that humankind, apart from the intervention of God's redemptive plan, can ever work in harmony together.
Amen.
It's not possible.
Yeah, you're right.
We see our nation states become irrational in their support of evil and try to prop it up. We see it with Russia presently in propping up the Assad regime that has murdered, never mind with gas, but murdered hundreds of thousands of their people, and they justify it. Why? Because they have other interests.
Right.
So they're not concerned. This is the problem. This you'll multiply over and over again through history. It goes on, and despite all the efforts of the United Nations, it's a sort of a doomed dream, and but people still aspire to it, and there's been a determined attempt in the last few decades in different fields of the world to bring together such a new world harmony. We see that in the arrival of the United Nations,
Right.
which largely was and has become ineffective in stopping conflict.
Right, yeah.
They couldn't stop the genocide in Africa. They come behind always and lament it, but they pick up the pieces, but they can't stop the carnage. And there's not the will within the United Nations to stop the carnage. And because it's self-serving interests by the major nations, and remains so. You see it in the attempt by the European Union, which started out as an economic federation. It was first called the European Economic Community, EEC, and it slowly but surely mutated. By the way, over the decades, with denial that they were moving towards a type of federation state system.
Wow.
But they were. And some nations like Britain and others joined under some form of deception because they joined the European Economic Union. It wasn't the European Union.
Is that what brought us to the Brexit?
That brought us to the Brexit,
Correct.
where there was an outrage in the United Kingdom over the decades that the people were never ever given an opportunity to vote whether they wanted their sovereignty removed and based in Brussels. So it became a pressure point, and eventually the British government conceded that they would have to give their people that opportunity, and of course you know what happened. And so you got these attempts at this, and it's called Babylon in the Bible because it's an attempt by humanity to rebuild the tower.
Wow.
Without God.
Without God. Wow.
And if you look at the European Union, unashamedly, the building in Europe that represents the European Union, the building is in the form of the Tower of Babel, deliberately built.
Ziggurat format.
Deliberately built.
Wow.
They even advertised it, and it was left the picture of it was left unfinished, as if we're going to now put on the capstone and we're going to build this new Babylon.
Isn't that interesting?
And that's why the Bible calls it Babylon.
Wow.
And within context, it's not just like a smear. It's a reference to the book of Genesis, an attempt by humanity without God to reject the God of the Bible and to build something in rebellion against him, and to bring about then a new world order.
So in regards to eschatology then.
Now, eschatology talks about that.
Correct.
That it will, and I think what we're seeing particularly up until now, even America was lurching more and more and being folded into a new world order.
Under the Obama
under the previous years.
administration.
He even said that America has been too powerful on its own, too strong, and it will now play behind other nations. It will reduce its power. It will fold itself into the European Union. And so here we are. We have this globalist attempt to bring about this utopia. Now, in a way, I gather that many of these people are sincere. I worked in the European Union for years. They sincerely saw the problem and wanted to fix it, but all the time with the wrong apparatus.
Right.
And now with the election of the Trump administration, there's been something of a hiatus in this movement. And that's why, to some degree, his administration is so hated all over the world, because he's put a spanner into the globalist agenda.
Yes.
And for the present, he's putting America first, which is anathema. That's what he campaigned on to the globalists.
Right.
And but we see a glimmer of hope in that God is giving America an opportunity to turn to Him and to love Him and serve Him and repent. And so we thank God for that. And that's true.
Wonderful.
And His decision on behalf of His people to fulfill their will with the return of their embassy in Israel to Jerusalem is another crucial part of that. And people can say what they like. That's the truth. He has once again espoused Christian values upon which America was built, and that's a fact. The American Constitution and the whole thing was built on Christian underpinnings, and it cannot be gainsaid. Now, the issue eschatologically is the Bible talks about an attempt to bring about such a global entity, and the Bible says that the impetus or the catalyst that will push the nations over the precipice, whereby they will willingly forego their sovereignty, will be some type of major, serious war in the Middle East.
Yeah. Surrounding Israel.
And that's surrounding Israel and other nations. And that's what we see developing today. We saw it this last week with the attack of the American administration with allies, France and England, against Syria. But you already have the Russians there, and you have all sorts of competing military interests there, including Iran. And then you've got Saudi Arabia. And so something's coming, I'm telling you now, something's coming down the pike, as they say in America.
Yeah.
That's going to be an explosive upheaval in the Middle East.
Well,
and that will lead to Babylon enforcing its will. People will say, we have to stop this, give us global government. And that's what the Bible teaches about.
Well, thank you, Malcolm. You know, we realize that there's a lot of moving parts, that it's a lot more complicated than 10 minutes, but thank you for that, Malcolm. And I know there's a lot more to talk about on this issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Up next, we visit Neot Kedumim to learn about ancient water wells.
So if we go back to what I was saying before about the time when the children of Israel were in the desert and they were crossing over and God was giving them clues as to what they were going to get when they got here, He told them also, apart from the 7 species, what they were going to eat. He also gave them clues about water. They were coming from the land of Egypt where water had never been an issue. The river Nile flowed from the plains of Africa and they always had plenty to drink. However, obviously water during the desert was a very, very big issue for them, and they wanted to know what was going to be. So what does God say to them in Deuteronomy chapter 11? The land you're about to enter and possess is not like the land of Egypt from which you have come. There the grain you sowed had to be watered by your own labors, like a vegetable garden. But the land you're coming into is a land of hills and valleys, which soaks up its water from the rains of heaven. They are being told that there is no original source of water into this land. All their water comes from the rains of heaven. And therefore, what is it showing? It is showing their dependence on God. So if we go back a few thousand years and we think about this, children of Israel, they cross into the land. What is the first thing they're told? That the manna has stopped and they have 1 year to live off the crops produced by the Canaanites. And after that, a nation which has been shepherds for the generations is now going to become farmers. What are they going to start cultivating? The 7 species. How are they going to do it? They're going to have to become farmers and start working the land and creating the land. So what do they do for water? Originally, I would assume they went up and down to the valleys to collect the water. But after a while, they put their heads together and they came up with what we like to call the first Israeli startup. Okay, first Israeli startup is this hole here, which
It echoes.
it echoes. This is not actually a well. Okay, this is not a well. This is what is described as a water cistern. The water cistern you are looking at is a couple of thousand years old.
Wow.
When we founded this nature reserve over the 625 acres, they found 40 to 50 of these water holes over the area. It was basically proof that this area, which we know was halfway between Tel Aviv, the port of Jaffa, the Via Maris, and Jerusalem, this area was basically a bed and breakfast for pilgrims.
Oh.
This was an area where people came halfway. Nowadays, it takes an hour from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Back then, on your donkey, it took a couple of days. This would be an area where they would stop, have a drink, have a rest before they carried along their way. So these holes, what were they? They were dug deep into the ground. This area here, what's called the lowlands, has very soft rock. It's very easy to dig. The top layer is very hard. This is a rock which has been placed on top. Yeah, the whole area is limestone. Yeah, which makes it very soft. They would dig down. If you think about the hole, this hole here is just the opening. The hole underneath is a large bell-shaped hole, which probably covers this entire area here, and it will be plastered so that the water doesn't leak out. Okay, now how are we going to get the water in? Well, I have stood here on a rainy day with the rain pouring. They would dig channels down the hillsides. You see the water is the hole is never located at the top of a hill. So you imagine putting a bottle out in the rain, very little water goes in. It is halfway down the hill, and channels would be dug, and the rain literally pours down this channel, and there is a hole here, and it pours into the hole. And this is what we have here. Joseph was thrown into a pit without water. He was thrown into one of these pits which hadn't been maintained, and then the water leaks out. And there's no way anybody can get out of these. These can go down as far as 20 feet and hold hundreds of cubic meters of water.
What's at the end of this rope?
At the end of this rope, you want to see what's at the end of this rope? Okay, you're going to be Rebecca now.
Okay.
Okay, you're my Rebecca. Rebecca pulls up the water. You're pulling up the water because Rebecca had to pull water. Who does she pull water for? For Eliezer and all his camels. When Eliezer came wandering to look for a wife for Isaac, Abraham sent Eliezer on a long journey through the desert.
The rope is wet.
The rope is wet. Keep going. Okay. This is good water. Okay, it's fresh water.
This is for an animal. It's rubber.
Now it's rubber. Originally, it would be animal hide. This is good water. This is water that's gone into this hole in the last few weeks in the rains that have come. And this water would be water for a community living on this hillside. It would be water for drinking. It would be water for their crops. It would be water for their cattle. And obviously the nature of this water is when it's been sitting here for 8 months at the end of the summer, it doesn't taste so good. I want you to think about the nature of a land which doesn't have a drop of water for 8 months. Okay, which is dry, dry, dry. It's very hard for you to imagine it in Canada. But when you live here and you gradually see all the green that you see over the 8 months starts to disappear, everything turns brown, everything is covered in dust. So when do we start praying for rain? We start praying for rain at the end of the Feast of Tabernacles. The first rains generally come around October, November time. So then if you think about Jesus standing on the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles, hold on a second. The last day of the Feast of Tabernacles, and he makes this wonderful speech. What does he say? On the last and greatest day of the feast, Jesus stood and said in a loud voice, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, streams of living water will flow from within him." He is talking to the people spiritually, but also physically they are thirsty. A drop of rain hasn't fallen in 8 months. They are thirsty, and he's appealing to their spiritual and to their physical thirst. They are very aware of how much they need, what he has to offer them, what he has to say to them. We know that the water systems and the water holes and the wells feature in many, many stories throughout the Bibles. I mean, I mentioned the story of Eliezer and his camels that came wandering to look for a wife, and they found Rebecca at the well, who then pulled untold amounts of water for the camels. We know that Jacob, this on top of a well would normally be a big stone, okay, called the rolling stone in Hebrew. But we know that Jacob came to the well and he wanted to pull water for Rachel, and normally a stone would be so heavy, purposely heavy, so that only a group of shepherds from different herds, different shepherds could pull the water, and nobody can individually steal it. But he was so overcome with love for Rachel that with one push he managed to push push the stone off and pull out water for her sheep. We know that Moses met Zipporah at the well, and it's no different from nowadays. Nowadays, if you want to go on a date, you want to meet someone, where'd you go? You go to the bar, you go to Starbucks. Where does all the gossip happen? The water cooler. It was no different back then.
We conclude our program today with some sights and sounds within Israel. Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to visit our website at www.icejcanada.tv or call us at 1-866-324-9133. And for our Canadian residents, you can ask for your free Canada Israel pin. Through your contribution, you can participate by giving to ICEJ Canada, to the Haifa Home for Holocaust Survivors, Women at Risk Red Carpet Project, Operation Life Shield Bomb-Proof Shelters, Shoulder to Shoulder Alias Support, School for the Deaf, Beit Singer Children's Home, Israel in Crisis, Beit Rachel Strauss Inclusive Community, Magan David Adam Emergency Services, Christian Friends of Yad Vashem, Scholarships for Canadian Young Adults to Experience Israel, Educational Fund, ICEJ Communication Media Fund, Gift, Estate, Securities Funds.